Round 9 of Norway Chess, the Armageddon game between Alireza Firouzja playing white and Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces, was a very interesting encounter indeed, featuring a Giuoco piano opening, which does have the reputation for being a bit dry, a little bit boring, but not in this game. You get to see a little bit of everything here, a piece sacrifice from Alireza, and we'll see how Carlsen deals with that in a few moments. But let's get right into these initial moves here. We have bishop to a7, just anticipating that Firouzja is going to push with b4 and expand over there on the queen side, which he does. Queen to e7, supporting bishop to e6 in a minute. Now b4, here comes the expansion over here, bishop e6 and a4, getting ready to push to b5 maybe, giving that knight a kick. Castles. Now bishop to d5 from Firouzja, an interesting idea. He's going to try to get rid of this knight on c6 possibly so that he can push with d4. So Carlsen now gets provocative with the move g5, trying to take advantage of that bishop's position on d5. If you were to just drop this bishop back here to g3, then you're going to lose material on d5. So you really have to do something. You can either take on e6, take on c6, or do what Firouzja does in the game and sacrifice a piece. Knight takes g5. Now, Carlsen does not accept the sacrifice. If he were to take like this, then Firouzja would get some pressure here, getting the two pawns for the piece. And how are you dealing with this pin on the knight? You can't move the knight. The queen's tied down to defending. But the engine says this is the best way to go and that you should play king to g7 and that black will be able to untangle himself, surprisingly. But you can't really blame Carlsen for not wanting to be in this situation. So here, let me just give you one line of how black can deal with this. If you were to go king h1, so you could play f4 in a second, then rook h8 is what black does. You play f4, and you can actually play something like knight g4 here, offering the queen, because if you take, then that's going to be checkmate. So, the engine has determined that this is fine for black, and it's the best way for black to play. But in the game, Carlsen says no thank you, and he takes on d5, and we have this interesting exchange of pieces where the bishop's captured on e6, queen takes on h4. Now Firouzja grabs the knight here on d5. F takes e6. Now Carlsen has three pieces converging on f2, hence the move g3 from Firouzja, hitting the queen, and then after the queen moves, only then do we take out the knight on c6. B takes c6, okay, queen to e2, adding some support to that f2 square. Now rook to f5 from Carlsen, which is not the best move. The engine said rook to f7 is better. You're going to see why in a minute. Okay, so we have king to h1. The rooks double. f3, okay, the pawn's defended by the knight here. And now rook to g5 is what's played. Now, if the rook had been played to f7 and then went to g7, this would be better because the rook can be attacked with tempo at some point with the knight going to e4. I believe that's why rook f7 back here was the better move. But we have queen to g2 from Firouzja offering the queen trade. Carlsen says no, he goes to f5. Now he's hitting d3, so that pawn is indirectly defended with rook a to d1. Now if you were to take out that pawn, then knight to e4 is no good for black, hitting the queen, hitting the rook. Okay, so Carlsen doesn't go for that. He's a little more tactically aware than that. He plays h5, going for h4. Now how are you dealing with that as white? Well, Firouzja just plays knight to b3. His idea is he's just going to counterattack, try to hit that c6 pawn in a minute from a5. But better here would have been actually queen to e2 so that this pawn here isn't pinned, because the best way to deal with h4 apparently, according to the engine, is to take that pawn. Of course, assuming that you've moved the queen. But Firouzja's idea here is to play g4 instead. Okay, but this creates a big hole here on f4, which the engine says black should immediately plug with the move queen to f4. But Carlsen plays queen to h7, which is not best, and the engine's given white actually the advantage here. Carlsen's idea is to push the pawn to h3, but Firouzja didn't really want to hang out on g2 anyway, so was h7 for the queen really necessary? He wants to move the queen anyway to a more central location. So Carlsen's queen is a little misplaced over there, according to Stockfish anyway. h3 now, he gets his move in. Now d4 from Firouzja. The pawn is captured, and then we have pawn takes pawn. Now that was not the best move. Instead of capturing the pawn, Firouzja should have taken the opportunity to play f4 with an attack on the rook, just push his backward pawn, then capture this pawn here. But he took it right away, and then Carlsen gets in e5. Okay, locking down the f4 square a little bit. You don't want to take because you don't want the rook to come into the action there with tempo. So knight a5 is what's played, hitting c6. Okay, this drops the pawn on d4, but the knight is able to take the pawn out on c6, hitting the bishop. Also notice that the queen's hitting the pawn on a6. That would be a juicy pawn to gobble up, but you don't want to do it until the time is right. Carlsen plays queen to f7 here. And the reason queen takes a6 is bad here is because queen a2 comes, threatening checkmate right here. You don't want the black queen to infiltrate, which is why rook to c1 is what's played here in order to, I'll show you what happens here. Rook g6 now. He wants to go to f6 and triple up on the f pawn. Now you can take on a6 because if queen a2 were played, you would have queen c4 check supported by the rook here and forces a trade of queens. That's why rook c1 was played here. But what's played here is rook to f6 from Carlsen. Okay, tripling up. Queen e2 adds some defense, but you can't save the f3 pawn at this point. Carlsen captures. And we have a big trade down of some heavy pieces here. Queens come off the board. All right, now the bishop is taken. E takes d4. And the engine says the position is equal. But on the very next move, rook a1, it is no longer equal. Black is winning. Carlsen could win with the move d3, which he does not play. Now let me just show you a few reasons why this move is so powerful. At the end of the day, there's going to be a checkmate threat if this rook ever gets to this first rank here. So this rook cannot leave that first rank. And so let me just show you some variations. If you just start pushing the pawn here, then d2 is going to come. You can try to get in front of the pawn, but now there's rook e3. And like I said, you can't take the pawn because there's going to be mate. And then this move's just coming. You're just done. Okay, so what else? You can try to get the king away from the corner there so there's no mate threat. But then c5 comes. You can take, put the rook on c1. But then, okay, let's say rook e3. That's the move here. You start getting the king over here. We're going to have c4. And if you ever play rook takes c4, it's just too late. There's this move here. You want to try to get behind the pawn. Well, that's not working. You got the check. It's just, everything's just a little too late for white. There was one more line I wanted to look at. If you just go for a5 and just start pushing your own pawn, well then of course these pawns they're just faster, you know. The rook goes back to f8 here. That's a key move. You're just going to sack the rook if the pawn's promoted, and then you're going to, you know, promote your pawn. So that was the winning line for Carlsen, but he played rook to b3 instead, which again puts the game into equilibrium. a5 played, he takes on b4, and you know, at the cost of the b pawn, Firouzja is able to push his a pawn to a very ominous square, one square away from the promotion square, but Magnus Carlsen is just in time to stop it with his rook. And so we have this position here where Firouzja starts getting his king active. Now it's the battle between the one very far advanced pawn and Carlsen's three passers here. Very scary for white. And at some point here, Firouzja started getting extremely low on time. And this is just a nightmare for someone who's low on time. Even if you have plenty of time, these three passers working together, that's not something, I don't like that, you know. But Firouzja plays well. He gets his king into the action. And the position is still a draw. Okay, so we have these pawns advancing. Rook to a5, that is a good move. You're cutting off the king from coming in and causing problems. We had d3 check. Okay, the king goes to d2. King to c3, looking good. And now at this point, Magnus Carlsen plays d5. And for some reason, Firouzja plays rook to a2, which is a completely losing move. Why he didn't play rook takes d5, I don't know, because there would follow rook takes a7. You grab the pawn here on c4 with the king. The rook can go down here and try to grab this pawn, but white is going to be just fine. You take with the king, and then if rook takes h2, you just start moving the king over. The black king is cut off, and you know, white is going to be just fine. Contrast that with what was played by Firouzja in extreme time pressure, rook to a2, and now this allows Carlsen to start getting in with his king. He's going to grab this g4 pawn, and at this point Firouzja just resigns because he's got just like 1 second on the clock, and he knows he's messed it up. Even with such a short amount of time, he realizes that this is going to be the end for him. After rook to a5, for example, if the game were to continue, the king would take on g4. You can grab these pawns, but now look at the difference here. After rook takes a7, you grab the pawn on c4. The rook goes to a2. This is the same position we saw a few moments ago, where were we here? This position here, you know, contrast that to that. Okay, this is a whole different story with this king infiltrating. The rook's going to take here, and this is just completely lost for white. The pawn's going to end up promoting. So, a good resignation from Firouzja. It did not come too soon. He was down to like a second on his clock. And a good effort against the great Carlsen, who just is a master at these Armageddon games. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to give it your best shot, and you're probably going to lose almost every time. So, thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more coverage of these games from Norway Chess. Well, we have only one left, but you're going to see a lot more amazing performances from Magnus Carlsen on this channel, as well as some other very interesting chess-related content. See you on the next video.